We all struggle with feeling like there's not enough time in the day to be productive personally or professionally. We all struggle to make our time matter. It's time to take control. It's time to start investing in the corporation of you. At Athena, they've helped over 700 ambitious professionals achieve more by connecting them with best-in-class, globally remote executive assistants. Athena executive assistants go beyond basic administration tasks. They help you make time matter through the art of delegation. They believe delegation is the superpower of all highly successful people, and your personal EA will help you get there. Your EA is a one-on-one long-term partner to help you achieve your personal and professional goals. Take back your time. Join the waitlist at athenago.com. That's athenago.com.
In this year of the healthcare vote, we must take the mantle and move from being health consumers to health citizens and exercise our right to be health citizens, own our health system.
From Offscript Media, I am Matthew Zachary, and this is Out of Patience. Today's show is not a very special episode of Different Strokes, Facts of Life, Family Ties, Webster, or Blossom, but it is a very special episode nonetheless. Jane Sarasohn-Kahn has been a friend, teacher, mentor, Sherpa, conscience, and a big sister to me for over 15 years. I mean it when I say that she's as close to a biological family member as you can get without the Jerry Springer sibling DNA test. My origin story of becoming a cancer advocate diverged in 2004 between the nonprofit sector and the then nascent and emerging digital health universe, which they called Health 2.0. And Jane was right there to welcome me, the freshman newcomer and token cancer guy in the space with the inflatable swimmies that I needed to jump down that rabbit hole. Did I mention that Jane is one of the world's foremost health economists with a Nostradamus-level power for trend forecasting? She's also an award-winning author, blogger, speaker, thought leader, and the creator of Health Populi, one of, if not the most notable blogs covering the healthcare ecosystem. And her new book is Health Consuming, From Health Consumer to Health Citizen. If you don't know the meaning of the word mishpach, you're about to find out. Enjoy the show. Jane, oh my goodness, it's so awesome to have you here on my new radio show, because you've been on the old radio show, and in the epic band reunions of all epic band reunions. Unlike the Eagles, who said hell would freeze over, we never needed the hell to freeze over. And here we are, and I'm so excited to talk to you.
Oh, amen to that, my brother. I'm so happy to be with you. We go way, way back.
Like Stone Age, like Paleozoic Health 1.0 con stuff.
It's kind of 0.5 when I think about it.
I know, right? I don't even remember our origin story, but obviously it was through Stupid Cancer or I'm Too Young for This or whatever it was called back in the salad days. What I do remember is I think it was either 06 or 07 where Matt Holt and Inu Subaya invited me somehow, I think through my Missy Krasner Google connections, to keynote and play piano at the inaugural Health 2Con event. And I think that's where my freshman inauguration into the fraternity sorority of this universe began.
I think it was. I think it was the second year, 06, because I then came to interview you in 07 for the paper I wrote for California Healthcare Foundation in 08. But I remember you playing piano and then hearing your origin story about being at Binghamton University and your hand stopped playing piano. That was when you pre-diagnosed the fact that something was going on with your brain. And that was the beginning of me being in awe of you and your miracle story. So that is one of the things we've learned, and Susanna Fox talks about this a lot, is that really this is just, healthcare is just all about stories, really, and the power of the patient's story. And yours was certainly captivating when I heard it for the first time.
That event was really a like a wizard behind the curtain reveal of all these, like, there were like two versions of like Margaret being rapscallions back then. There was the the Livestrong origin universe of young adult cancer and what the NCI was doing with groups, and that was there. And then there was this like putting the words digital and health in the same sentence, to even just like as an idiom, didn't exist. And we were all just inventing things that weren't in the vernacular, aspiring to just break stuff because we saw opportunities.
Break stuff because necessity was the mother, and it was a mother to be sick. So, I mean, in that era, and I went back to that paper, which you can still download online at chcf.org. And
Wow.
It's free, and it's old, but it's a gem.
Yes.
Because it was really, I can list some of the people I spoke with you. So I spoke with Jack Barrett for that paper, and he had just come out of Yahoo Groups, health groups, to start We Go Health at the moment. I spoke with Ben Haywood of Patients Like Me fame, and they were young in that network, which they built for their brother, speaking of mother being a necessity of invention. And Amy Tendrich had just started Diabetes Mind. And even, which is fascinating because of his recent news with Amazon, Scott Shreve, who had just started Crossover Health, and he's now working with Amazon. And it took him all these years to build that great primary care model in Crossover Health, and just a few weeks ago, they announced that they'd be working with Amazon in their primary care clinics. So, I mean, this is the generation you were in, and you were the baby amongst all these folks.
I was, and I genuinely feel incubated and accelerated and almost like surrogately adopted, because I was kind of like the token cancer guy that happened to be there. And I was not a entrepreneurial startup business person, kind of like driving in both lanes over the last 15, 16 years in the nonprofit and the private sector. I feel like I'm a unique byproduct of all of these individuals who you mentioned and more.
Yeah, and you were the identity of I'm too young for this, which really was so apropos, because as you explained to me in that first lengthy conversation where I needed 2 Kleenex boxes for, you had said that you had fallen at your age of like 20 between pediatric cancer and adult cancer. And there was this gap, this hellish hole you fell into, because the peds oncologists didn't want to see you really. They didn't know what to do with you. And the adult cancer specialists didn't know what to do with you. So you really did forge this segment, this I'm too young for this segment of 18 to 24-year-olds out of necessity, and that great primal scream of, Jesus Christ, I need help. Just as the Haywoods did for their brother, and Amy did because she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was, a woman. And
Yeah.
she also didn't have a place to go at the time. So she was a tremendous pioneer in her way, for her condition as well. But anyway, yeah, you were the baby, and we all adopted you and embraced you. And, now you have your own babies who aren't babies anymore.
Do you think that there's a new freshman class of us coming up these days? Because we're like the first Degrassi High generation. Maybe I'm one and a half Degrassi Guy head generation. Like, have we given birth to an entirely new generation of innovation?
The innovators that I'm seeing now aren't so much the patients, but the caregivers, which is like a new thing. So when I look at the founders of the voice technology company Orbita up in Boston, and I've met Nate Treelor a couple times, and I'm a big fan of what they're doing. So they're like an early generation of people developing Alexa skills in health. But the way Nate told his story to me a few years back at HIMSS or CES, I forget where I met up with him, he and his partner in the business both had relatives, parents or grandparents who were developing dementia. So they had been successful digital tech people, not health, who found a need in their lives to then play around and create voice skills for their ailing and health managing family. So I see this spur coming out of not just self-help, but caregivers helping develop things who are smart in tech and are finding their way to health. And we're seeing that as a kind of a new trend, I think, in the last few years, where it's not just about you, but it's about the people that you love.
That speaks to kind of like this anthropologic evolution of, we talk Web 1, Web 2, Health 1, Health 2. No one's ever said Health 3. Like, did we forget that there's a linear path to numerology? Like, what is, if there was a 3 in the Wikipedia of let's invent Health 3.0, what does that mean in the wake of what we tried to be doing for 20 years?
Yeah, in the Jane world, and the way I'm looking at the world now, looking back, because I was president at the beginning in caveman era, and here I am still at it, I see now that's all about connecting these pieces together. So, here we are in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. We should give people context for the moment in which we're speaking. It's in calendar terms, August 6, 2020 in the moment. And in the moment, we're burning up all over America with spreading virus, which, who would have thought we'd be here 6 months ago, but we are. But one thing we've learned, and one of the gifts of the pandemic, has been that we actually know there are data to describe us beyond our health care, but for our health, our mental health, our mood, our sex lives, the mania we're all living, our retail receipts from, buying groceries and all of that. And if we could just get interoperability together, which we are starting to, we can put together the social networking, the retail data, the healthcare claims data, the self-generated data from my Oura Ring and my Apple Watch. And you should see what I've got on today. But, I'm tracking lots of things, and even my Pulse Ox device, because I'm paranoid, about keeping the virus at bay and measuring things. So I think we're in not a 3.0 era, but just the ecosystem era now. And we don't have to put a number on it, because we're generating so much information across these different platforms and planes of existence that we can start to gather this data and make sense over it. So I'm not kind of looking at 3.0 as much as connecting person to person, data point to data point, and making sense out of it.
Are we hitting like a saturation point where we're going to be too dependent on things, doing things for us, and taking away any sort of instinctual purpose on just being more self-aware analog?
The terror and the apocalyptic vision of the Wall-E world, which I thought was a wonderful movie and storyline to watch, that's a real cautionary tale, because absolutely in the stay-home era, and I'm updating my book, Health Consuming, as we speak, getting it done by tomorrow so I can take a vacation next week. But one of the cautions of the stay-home, alone together era, the quarantining, is the fear of going out. So, your generation and digital natives talked about fear of missing out. But now a lot of people, younger and older, have fear of going out for fear of contracting the virus. Not everybody, but there's a large cohort of people who are still quite, guarded. And so, we have a risk of not connecting socially, and God bless Zoom and FaceTime and, our talking over this platform right now, because we can connect digitally. But I really do miss reaching out and hugging you. I really love my Matthew Zachary hugs, and I can't have that right now. So I'm doing it now virtually. But I think we are at a risk. There's always risk in these things, of being too digital. And in the pandemic, we have mental health reactions to that. People spending too much time on technology. So there's a new social determinant of health that's emerging, which is, too much tech, making us depressed in a lot of different ways. So, it's all in balance. We have to remember who we are Now there's another Disney illusion, Lion King, Simba, remember who you are. So it all comes back to Disney, man.
Well, I mean, you brought up a word that's always been like this contingency in the vernacular of our bubble, which is the word consumer. And, when I was diagnosed in the 90s, and we never talked about you being a consumer of health. Health just kind of happened to you. And there really were no opportunities for a patient to be considered a person. And the first time I heard consumer health, I'm thinking, going to shop at Walmart or at Walgreens or going to shop at CVS. I'm just a consumer of toothpaste and whatever. And then I started hearing the phrase consumer oncology. And now you're using health consumption. Have we reached the point where that isn't maybe just words anymore, not jargon? Is there a layperson way in which we can understand how the consumer, whether it's a market of consumption you don't want to be consuming in, like chemotherapy, or whether it's a market where you want to understand what the best retail product is, gene testing or whatever, your watch or pill pack or whatever, where are we in that sense of how much you do have control over consumer choice versus how much you don't have control over consumer choice?
Well, I use consumer, and I've used it for a long time as a health economist. As people were taking on more out-of-pocket payments, we saw generic drug price differentials of $5, $10, $20 in the 90s start to happen. And at that point, when I was working a lot with pharma companies, which is actually where I met Jack Barrett at a big pharma he was working with when he was at Yahoo, we were in the same meeting. And at that meeting, I was giving a talk about these co-pays. So for prescription drugs, it's been fairly easy to think about being a consumer. You talked about CVS or Walgreens. And in fact, when we talk about retail health, in the 1.0 version of retail health, it was all about the pharmacy, because you could be a consumer at the point of purchase and say, give me the generic before states or health plans mandated you got the generic first as step therapy or just to save the plan money. Well, now, even if you're a cancer patient, you may have choice, not always, but you may be able to choose between one organization and another. You can certainly shop around for second opinions in places like Cleveland Clinic and Mayo Clinic and lots of other places. I have offered that virtually via phone calls and a version of telemedicine for a long, long time, for many years. Not everything, of course, is consumable because we have this lack of transparency of price and quality and measurement. And the industry, that is hospitals, have long held that as sort of proprietary information, even though we now have laws emerging throughout the U.S. on greater transparency. But no, we're in a much greater era of health consumerism as we spend more out of pocket. And my latest riff on that and belief in this year of the healthcare vote in 2020 on November 3rd is that we must take the mantle and move from being health consumers to health citizens and exercise our right to be health citizens, own our healthcare, own our health system, and be self-determining in that. So take back control. I'm morphing from my use of consumer to citizen in health because I think in the pandemic, we've learned a lot about why we are health citizens. We just don't realize it yet.
Back with our guest after the break.
Has your chronic illness made it difficult to continue working in the traditional way? Want to learn how to find and create flexible remote work that both accommodates your chronic illness and generates an income? Join the Patients Getting Paid membership, a community of chronicpreneurs where people just like you find workshops and trainings, weekly updated condition-specific gigs, twice monthly coaching calls, co-workings, accountability, and the kindest community to support you on your path to make money while working from anywhere and taking good care of yourself. Learn more or join us at patientsgettingpaid.com.
So we're back, and this time we're going to flip the switch, and Jane's going to be interviewing me because apparently there's a curiosity about how I got from A to B to C, and yet somehow my plan B became my plan A.
Well, that's one way to put it. You know, when we met, you were I2Y. I'm too young for this. And this foundation then morphed into Stupid Cancer, this nonprofit that just took the world by storm. And you created this community, which is an important word, community of young people with cancer all over the world. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that early era and what that was like, that zeitgeist, as you were riding the growth of the 2.0 social media world, content creation and community creation. Talk about that experience, because it was quite a zeitgeist you were creating and living in.
It was an odd moment in time when no one quite knew what they were going to be doing when they grew up. We just knew we were angry about something. But what really changed for me was having gone 7 years feeling like I was the only 20-something that ever had any cancer. And I was playing piano again. I was working in the advertising industry. I just felt like I was completely alone. And I met a gentleman named Craig Lustig. I've been very vocal about this guy. He's like a brother to me. I'm still best friends with him years later. He happened to be on the board of an organization called the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship, which is one of the dominant influencers in public health policy and oncology in the country in DC. And I was, again, that Wizard of Oz curtain got pulled back, and I started to realize, wow, this would have been so nice to have back in 1996 when the yellow rotary cord phone was on my parents' wall and I had no one to talk to. But similar to what we talked about at the top of the show about, you know, Jamie and Ben and Amy, we were born of our condition. We just didn't know we had a door to even walk through until it manifested itself. And for me, that was the door. And there were so many incredibly inspiring, talented people in that early Livestrong, pre-Livestrong heyday space that were advocates and doctors and sociologists and health economists and survivorship experts and nonprofit storytellers. But there really were no like insane Doc Brown, wild-eyed marketing people. And I fit this odd niche. And I said, if I'm going to build a community that I wish that I had, and I'm dragging all these amazing people with me, what should that be? What is the anti-Hallmark card? What is the non-have a ribbon? You know, here's a thing, you poor thing, the pity party of cancer, which was this Deborah Winger terms of endearment stretched over 20 years. It didn't work anymore. And what survivorship meant to me was making sure that someone else like me doesn't feel judged and alone. That was my interpretation of it. So calling it I'm too young for this was exactly the kind of go fuck you, tongue-in-cheek, self-victimization that worked for Gen X. And before hashtags were hashtags, kids, they were called slogans. So the slogan for I'm too young for this, also I2Y, was stupid cancer. Why not? Because that's what Homer Simpson would say. Gen X all the way. So that was my entry into doing what I wished that I had. Again, similar to all of us, building things we wished we had. And that was, you know, this was before the internet. There was a moment in time you cannot replicate. There was no broadband. AOL was still like kind of DVDs and CD-ROMs floating around in physical spaces. And, you know, I think MySpace was there. Facebook barely launched. Obama was, there was nothing. There was nothing. There was no iPhones, no Android.
No.
The only thing you had was just yourself and like a mailing list and some paper. So scrappy to get these things done. And it did grow because like all of us, when you're the first, you don't know that you're the first.
That's such a great way to put it. You don't know you're the first, so you just muddle through it. And that's what everybody was doing in that cohort that you were talking about, Matthew and Indu, founding Health 2.0 as a convener. They were conveners of people like you who didn't actually know exactly where things were going, but it was very organic and it was of the moment. So that was so amazing to put it that way. So you came through that for over a decade of growth and marketing and going global. I mean, this thing grew like Topsy. And then in the middle of all that, you became a dad. So how has that informed what you're doing? Because I know it has in very profound ways that you don't talk about a lot.
The most interesting way to answer that question is that I used to conflate or comport what happened at Stupid Cancer in relation to how old my kids were. But now I conflate how old my kids were with regard to what happened at Stupid Cancer.
That's fascinating.
It's like, oh my God, we went to Vegas? Wait, well, they were 5. No. So when they were 3, this happened. So like it's been this amazing, I won't say de-Velcroing of the process, but being able to, one of my favorite books is Shel Silverstein's Falling Up, or in Toy Story, Falling with Style. You kind of don't know what you're doing. And if you think about when Steve Jobs revealed the iPod in like 2002, whatever, he said, never give people what they want, give them what they don't know they need. And at the end of the day, Stupid Cancer was what people didn't know they needed. And like building an app, you let the users decide what the thing becomes. You don't prognosticate around what you assume to be. And Stupid Cancer as a business model, as like a Harvard Business Review study, was all about being built by, for, and with the community. And it evolved exactly bespoke to suit. And along the way, I learned that I was not infertile. And I learned that there were ways to just be fertile enough to have a BOGO at the IVF clinic and get twins. So it changed everything. And as you know, and my listeners know, my kids are the Truman Show of oncology. Thousands, hundreds, millions of people know my kids exist as this crazy miracle story. And like, they're going to be freaking out when they hit 18 and figure out who the hell they really are.
Right.
But that really did create so much motivation, because that was 2010. We barely had like 2 employees back then.
Yeah.
And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And it was a unique and rare phenomenon. It still is.
It was. And they've been growing and growing and growing. And I'm amazed by them. I follow them on your, Insta and other networks. And so, no, I love that part of you and the story, because it was another miracle. Again, organic.
Yeah.
And, of the time. So you and Jess, beautiful parents, and, love that part of your story. And we had to get that on there because I've been part of it from beforehand, in terms of observing and praying hard. So I love that. So this idea that this thing grew like Topsy and you were, falling up, as it were, you got to a point, though, with that project, that part of your life, that chapter, that you didn't want to fall up that way anymore, and you wanted to get on with the next thing. So what was the motivation to take this or say goodbye to this amazing organization that was so defined by you? You were the persona of this thing. Your DNA is in the organization, and the organization persists, but you're not with it anymore. So why did you decide to move to the next chapter?
I got to witness many similar parallels in the founders' ethos of the nonprofit space. And there are very few founders in the nonprofit space that either are still here or manage to not decide to leave. They kind of stick around because it's their baby, and that's how you want to belong to the cause you engendered. And I started to really see some of the inherent challenges, the cracks, in the paint by staying too long, or maybe you're not wearing out your welcome. But I think the purpose of starting something is intended to let it go at some point. Mm-hmm. And a combination of factors. I put a very well thought out post on LinkedIn in November 2018, which like 90,000 people. I had no idea. Like, it was insane lightning rod. I was not expecting the wonderful warm response. So thank you everyone that did that. But when I started this, I was newly married with no kids, off the heels of a fairly lucrative career, and I had nothing to lose. And I figured, what the hell? And as time went on, you get a little, your knees don't maybe bend the same way, and there's a little thing in your spine that didn't happen, and you get a little age, you kind of get older. And at the same time, the job gets bigger, and success means growth. And I kind of like the Sisyphus part of building things. And fortunately, I consider what Stupid Cancer achieved with our partners in our community huge success, because it did accomplish some significant public health milestones that were set out and set forth in the mid-2000s. So it really wasn't a mission accomplished per se. It was a mission accomplished with an asterisk. And I was very articulate in trying to rationalize this with myself, because when do you put the flag in the ground and say, I did enough? When is enough? Dayenu, when it was enough, right? To the Jews out there, Dayenu.
That's right.
So they had like 4 nodding heads on the radio. So I kind of built my own glass ceiling. I kind of didn't feel like I could break things anymore. And my dad gave me this wonderful little like statement, which is like, moving on is hard, but knowing when is harder. And
that's a gift. What a great thing.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a great mantra.
Thanks, Dad. But it just, all the things kind of hit at the right time. Nothing was obviously behind the scenes hunky dory. It was great. There were lots of confluences of different things, and I just had to make a decision. And I called Jess and I said, I got to go. And she's like, what took you so long? So I knew it was the right time to step down and place it in very capable hands, which is where it is right now.
Absolutely. So fascinating. So, you're always jumping into something that doesn't exist, or it's a disruptive moment. So now we're in the midst of the pandemic. The advertising industry is falling apart. The media industry is falling apart, and the entertainment industry is falling apart. Witness Disney and AMC movies, and then the rise of Netflix and streaming at home. Here you are jumping into the middle of a new media and advertising kind of opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about that and tell us why you think you should jump into the middle of this industry that's so crazy right now?
So when I stepped down, I was approached by, the Friends of Matt community, the network I built, all the wonderful people who helped make me and who I helped make together to do amazing things. And it was humbling to be asked, how can we help you now? I wasn't prepared to receive. And one specific thing did happen. I went to ASCO. In 2019 to do a gig for a pharma company. And for the first time, not panhandle, begging for money for sponsorships, which is very cathartic.
Welcome to a business model.
I know. And I was asked point blank, what's going to happen to the Stupid Cancer Show, which we should also remind our listeners was kind of like the flagship that defined Stupid Cancer for all those years. We had the first radio show in healthcare before we called them podcasts. And I was thrilled to interview thousands of people over hundreds of shows and had millions of listens aggregate. And it was its own odd phenomenon for its time. And I was asked, what's going to happen to it now that you step down? And I could only assume they were going to sunset it or repurpose it. But the sentiment across the board from more than one person, in no coincidence, was you better find a way to get back behind a microphone.
Interesting.
So this whole company, this off-script media thing that's become this odd juggernaut media thing during a pandemic, was born of my network. And I felt it was built by, they say death by committee. This was life by Friends of Matt Squad.
Yeah.
So, you could not have foreseen you probably could have foreseen the pandemic based on your perception of our politics, but no one could have foreseen this being what transpired in 2020 when you're trying to build a brand new idea and a brand new business concept. But I think the elevator pitch was based on a George Carlin skit. He said, if you stick two things together that have never yet been stuck together before, some schmuck will buy it. And and I did all this analysis and all this surveying and no one's ever stuck together patient advocacy or consumer health advocacy with broadcasting. They don't exist. And podcasts are great, but they're very transactional, educational, or murder mysteries, or politics, or sports. But this medium of patient storytelling and the jargon of patient centricity and patient education, it doesn't exist in audio form. Why is that? I was curious. So entering a white space is kind of my jam.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You build the model from scratch, first to market, try to fail first. And at the end of the day, who knew that launching the first patient advocacy broadcast company during a pandemic would have been the weirdest, guilty timing of all timing?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that's what, visionaries see. And I'm not pandering to you by saying that. But I mean, it's you put disparate things together and here you are. And it is the opportunity time. And as you say, podcasting is sort of the 1.0, and you're bringing another dimension to that. So I think that's why this is going to be so successful, if I may forecast that.
Accepted, Nate Silver.
Exactly, the 540 view of things.
It's been a phenomenon to see this really grow from nothing so quickly with this amazing team that I've now built to do this with. But the desire to appreciate the value of what like single sensory audio, we're videoed out. I believe very firmly that the health citizen, to quote your nomenclature, is ready for a different medium to experience peer-to-peer education and credible, entertaining content that will help them live their lives better.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really true. And I think it's particularly true in the pandemic era. I've been really studying consumers' behavior reshaping, not just health consumers, but consumers in general. And I think there is this video sort of overload now. We're seeing even younger people putting that down and saying, I want real relationships and not just digital ones. And so it does bring us back to that great era of radio that I remember growing up. My father, driving around in the car listening to the early era of talk radio, but with some real engaging content. And you talked about entertainment. And you're right, in this era of over information in healthcare, we need to entertain each other. We need to find joy in all this. And that's why the peer-to-peer healthcare trend that Susanna talks about is so salient right now, because that's where authenticity is. And we hunger for competence and authenticity to be able to trust in this very skeptical era where of quote, fake news in healthcare. Who do we trust? Experts like Dr. Fauci and patients who have come through it with real experience. So I think you're tapping into that new thing.
I think that if I didn't, I'd have to retire. I just want to chase things that don't exist. It excites me to define new markets. And one of the most interesting and relevant compliments I've ever been able to receive was that my gift and my curse is that I'm always 5 years ahead of everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So everyone else, catch up to me, please. I'm building a thing here, guys. Come on.
Yeah. Well, that's it's painful too to be first, to make the first Kleenex or Zoom, which was not a new thing, but we seem to think that we discovered it in the pandemic for Passover seders and Easter Sunday dinners with family. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to be first. But when you are and you crack into something like that, how exciting it is. So I know it's going to be, hard work. You make it sound easy, but I know it's hard. And Matt, you did it.
I can't think of a more gratifying note to end our, 1.0 high school reunion podcast recap on. Obviously, this is one of many, many shows I want to do with you. I've been thoroughly enjoying your new book. I will mention it on the show and many other shows and on social media. From Health Consumer to Health Citizen, Health Consuming by Jane Sarasohn-Kahn. You got a whole bunch of amazing people here that wrote some crazy crap about you on the back. My goodness, you must be important.
I never burn a bridge.
Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough. This has been so mishpach and gestalt and cathartic and all the Jewish words that end
Very
in
mishpach.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
indeed. Well, you're my bro, and you always will be, and I couldn't be kvelling more.
Yes, well done. With all the gestalt that my grandma would use. Thank you, Jane.
Bless you, my friend.
That's all for today, folks. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and tell all your friends to listen. Out of Patience with Matthew Zachary is a product of Offscript Media. Our executive producer is Matthew Zachary. Our senior producers are Jen Horenjeff and Andrew McDowell. Darren Tunn is our production intern. It is recorded, mixed, and edited by Matthew Zachary. Our theme music is by the Mike Van Allen Quintet and by Mara. For advertising and media inquiries, email media@offscript.com. Hit us up at contact@offscript.com to share comments, feedback, and make guest recommendations. For more information, visit offscript.com.